Hello mathematicians, puzzlers, and other curious people. In this video, we're going to take a look at some simple one-step equations and how we can solve them. These techniques can also be extended to equations with more steps. So the key thing to know to solve algebraic equations is that we use inverse operations. So inverse operations tend to come in pairs. So for addition, addition's inverse operation is subtraction, and vice versa. Similarly, multiplication has the inverse operation division, and division's inverse operation is multiplication. So we will use the inverse operation to whatever we see in these equations, and that will tell us the solution to these equations. So our first one here is a plus 3 equals 41. So what I'm going to do is use an inverse operation to make an equation that only has the variable on one side and a number that tells us the value of the variable on the other. So I'm going to start with what I have, which is that a plus 13 is the same as 41, and I'm going to change that by, on both sides, subtracting 13. I can make any change I want to, as long as I make the same change thoroughly to both sides. Now, this just eliminates, because if you have a, plus 13 minus 13 brings you right back to a. So now, on our left-hand side, we just have a. On our right-hand side, we just have 41 minus 13, which I should have had a calculator handy. No problem, I'll just do it the long way. So let's see, I get 28 from that. So this tells me that for this equation to work, I need a to equal 28. If a equals anything else, this equation will not work. So it's an example of an open equation. It's true or false depending on the value of a. And usually in algebra, we'll be working with open equations to find out specifically what that value of the variable is that makes it a true equation. Now here's our next equation. X, which is just some number, minus 14 is supposed to equal 23. So what we want to know is what x is. Here's what we have to work with. So I see we have a subtraction here. Well, the inverse operation for that is addition. So I'm just going to take what I start with and then make that same change on both sides of adding 14. Now I see that on my left-hand side, I will just have x. And on my right-hand side, I will have 37. There we go. So if x is 13, this equation will be true. Otherwise, this equation will be false. This next one's a bit trickier. So we've got that 26 times n equals 143. So let's see, 26 times n, that's multiplication, so the inverse operation is division. So I'll take 26 times n and 143, and I will divide both of those expressions by 26. Now on my left-hand side, and I could use a little more room because that was a taller step because of being a fraction. On my left-hand side, I will have only n. On my right-hand side, it's a little trickier. I know what I'll do. Yes, in my pencil pouch, I have this simple calculator. That'll be good enough for this because I'm just doing a single arithmetic operation. So I have 143 divided by 26, and that gives me 5.5. So if n equals 5.5, then when we do 26 times n, we'll get 143. If n equals anything else, I would get some different number, and this equation would not be true. So n is the solution. Last but not least, here I have the t divided by 5 equals 1.3. Well, division also has an inverse operation, multiplication. So let's take a look. Starting with what we already had, now I'm going to say, okay, what I would really like to do is multiply on both sides by 5, because that's the inverse operation, and I know because I started with something equal and I'm changing it the same way, I will get two things that are still equal. Well, let's see, 5t's divided by 5 would just bring us back to t. 1.3 times 5 looks like a good calculator problem. And my calculator informs me that that is 6.5. Now I want to point something out about this. These are not easily guessed numbers. 28, 37, you might come up with those if you just keep going up. 5.5 and 6.5, it would take a while. If it occurs to you to check decimals, you might come up with those. But make sure that you're using these inverse operations instead of guess and check, because eventually you'll have to deal with equations where the numbers might be some really obnoxious fraction, like 17/25 or worse. So make sure that you're proficient at using inverse operations, because that way, even numbers that you would never guess, you'll be able to calculate. Okay, so like I said, inverse operations are the key to where this is at, and just look for whatever operation is in the equation and just do that inverse operation. And other than that, calculator.